Book 1, Bloodkin, by Kathy Ashford. Chapter 9. Jazzeth, wakey wakey. Oh, sweet little bitch. No. It couldn't possibly be morning already. No. I rolled over and tried to shut Charlie out as he pounced around my room, pulling the curtains. My eyes felt like they were caked with filth, and my mouth tasted as if I'd been licking a cat's ass. I hate you, Charlie. Bugger off, I muttered, pulling my pillow over my face in a vain attempt to deny the intrusive morning. Charlie wrenched the pillow from me and yanked the blankets off the bed. It's picnic time! Come on, get up. You want a quick bath? Maybe. Coffee? I pulled myself into a ball, then gave up and tried to sit. Dizzy. Sick. Right here, kiddo. And the bath's all ready to go. He handed me a mug of extremely sweet coffee and I stood, swayed a bit, then sat back down with a thump, spilling hot coffee all over the robes I was still wearing from the night before. Oh, bollocks, bloody... Hey, look at that. The coffee slid off my robe and puddled on the floor, leaving not a mark. Neathy weef, my friend. We wear it for a reason. Huh. I stood more cautiously this time and waddled over to the bathroom, where I slipped off my clothes and eased myself into the bath. I sipped my coffee as I soaked, feeling sorry for myself, until Charlie knocked on the door. Hurry up, Jazz. Everyone's almost ready. I heaved myself out of the bath and dried off, dressing in my cream linen robe back in my room. Down in the reception the others had gathered, an entirely more subdued crowd than the previous night. Eve had packed 2 huge baskets of food, and they were being lugged down the stairs by Stephen and Ellen. When we were ready to go, Eve farewelled us cheerfully. Have a nice time, and don't forget to stop in at a temple. She looked at us miserable lot. Maybe on your way back then. Off you go, don't want to miss the ferry. We trudged out of the hall and turned right at the end of the lane instead of left, which would have taken us through the quarter and down to the docks, where I assumed we were heading. Instead, we followed the street down to the lake, and barely 5 minutes' walk from the hall we came out from between the last of the small lakeside cottages. A paved promenade ran beside the pebbled shore, and not much further along a single jetty pushed out into the lake. Tied up to the jetty was the ferry, an oddly shaped craft with 2 layers of decking and a chimney perched on top. Out of the shade of the quarter, the late morning sun was bright, glancing off the water and burning my eyes. Sella walked ahead of us, wearing a pretty white sundress with lace gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. Everyone else had their robes on, hoods pulled up against the glare. We wandered down to the end of the jetty and crossed the gangplank onto the ferry. Thomas in the lead gave the captain a handful of coins he counted out from a sizable purse and led us up some stairs to the upper deck. Lalitha found me as we took seats in the open air. She was wearing a new robe of khaki with a black pinstripe, and she had lined her eyes with kohl. She pointed at Stephen and Ellen as they struggled with the laden picnic baskets. That can't be right. We're treating them like they're servants or something. Charlie overheard and laughed. They don't mind. They'll go off and find something more interesting to do once they're a bit more accustomed to being outside. I spent a few months staying at the hall in Fortesta when I first left Vio, doing lots of the same things, and I think Jimmy did too. Our conversation was cut off as suddenly there was a whooshing noise and steam began to pour from the ferry's chimney. One of the deckhands cast off the rope that held us to the dock as a big paddle at the stern began to churn the water. Lalitha's black-rimmed eyes goggled. How on earth do they get it to do that? She whispered, awed. Steam power? You've never... No, I suppose not. Well, the steamers, journeymen mostly, heat the water in the engine cylinder until it converts to steam, which turns the turbines, which powers the paddles. Ah. Charlie leaned in so we could hear him above the creaking of the boat's machinery. I was a steamer for a while when I was a journeyman here. Bloody hard work, I tell you what. We fell silent and looked back over the stern of the ferry as it pulled away from the dock. Lil was magnificent in the sun, the human areas glittering, the Neathi Quarter dark, flashes of multicoloured awnings bright as they hung between the buildings. Further out on the lake, the ferry turned west, and the city glided past to starboard. I could see the great lump of the hall perched on the edge of the quarter. I could even make out the windows of my room. Past the quarter, the dock spilled out onto the lake, dwellings built less high up the hill behind, until the city petered out into farmland. Paddocks were dotted with tiny horses in the city's common stabling area. The ferry turned south now, and we headed across the widest part of the lake until Lil was barely visible behind us and we could see the other side. The land on the south shore of the lake had a few gentle hills, rolling off towards the flat plain where most of the grain for the city was grown. As we got closer, the ferry turned west again, and we passed a couple of small fishing settlements dotted along the shore. Sala and Mantley were standing up the front of the deck, and I rose to go talk to them. I came up beside Mantley and greeted the girls. Sala barely looked at me, and so, flustered, I turned to Mantley. "You're from Nello, aren't you?" "Yes. My parents have a farm right on the edge of town." Yeah?" She smiled at my awkwardness. "You know, before the leaving, Nello was the main town around here. I think that's why it's called Lake Nello instead of the other way round." "Really?" It was hard to imagine a time when Lil was not the great city it was now. "Oh, yes. I mean, the castle's been on the island for ages, of course, but Lil used to be just a temple and the wee village that serviced it. The Neathi chose the site just round from the castle to build their quarter, because it's warmer over there, apparently. Closer, too, to the entrance to the enclave. They had to bring out all that funny dark stone that doesn't reflect the light to build it. And then they built the academy, and Lil grew so big, and now Nello's just a fishing and farming town, really. Although there are a few rich little folk who have country retreats over here. Eh, Sala?" But Sala just sniffed and kept looking over the prow of the ferry. Far along the lake, at the very western corner, we could almost see where the Vondheim started, the great river that snaked across the whole country to Elion and the sea. We rounded a promontory, and there on our left was Nello. A wide cove of pebbly beach curved around to a handful of jetties up on the right. Up from the beach was a well-tended grassy area, bordered by shop fronts and cafes, and the roofs of the town stretched out to the south behind them. I could think of nothing more to say to the girls, and I wandered back to Charlie and Lalitha as the ferry pulled into the dock. We set up our picnic on the grass down by the shore, in the shade of an ancient gnarled old oak, whose enormous mossy roots pushed down the beach and into the lake. Sarah and Emma laid out the blankets Eve had sent with us, and mentally helped Stephen and Alan unpack the baskets. Jimmy perched on one of the tree roots and fished his moss pike and a big bag of white from a pocket in his robe. The ferry ride had been smooth, and the fresh lake air had certainly helped, but I was still feeling decidedly under the weather, so I was pathetically grateful when Jimmy sparked the full pipe and passed it to me. The gentle white vapour worked like a charm, and even as I passed the pipe to Lalitha, I could feel my belly grumbling with hunger. Talgith, who had curled up on the ferry, and for all appearances gone back to sleep, perked up when Lalitha handed him the pipe, and with the picnic finally laid out, we went to investigate what Minnie had packed for us. There were plates of sandwiches generously filled with cold meats, little jam pastries, and a big basket of fruit. Mantley poured coffee from some strange metal cylinders, remarkably still steaming hot. "Thermoflasks," Charlie pointed out, his face full of sandwich. "Neathi crafted. Bloody handy, eh?" Handy indeed, I thought, as I grabbed a handful of sandwiches and a plate and went to a sunny corner of the blanket to eat. Talgith and Lalitha came to sit with me, the mentors preferring to stay in the shade. Lalitha nibbled daintily at her lunch. Talgith wolfed whole sandwiches in one bite, hardly chewing. "Yeah, looking very suave today, Letha. Borrow some of Jimmy's coat." She blushed, but squared her jaw at Talgith. "He says it helps with the glare, and what with it being all sunny and all, I thought." "Well, I think you look very pretty," I told her, and she shoved me. Yeah, very gallant, Jazz. But it works." The pastries and fruit were passed around, and when Talgoth had finished, he let out a huge burp and sprawled in the sun like a well-fed dog. "So, Jazz, you and Stella, eh? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge." Lalitha almost choked on her coffee. "What?" "Jazz made out with Stella at the Thistle last night. Didn't you see?" "Fucking hell." The Neathi curse, spoken in her flat human tone, sounded particularly vehement. "Really, Jazz? Stella? I thought you had better taste." Talgoth hooted and I blushed. "Yeah, well, she's hardly looked at me today." "No, she wouldn't. She's a bitch. I told you that." "She was nice enough last night," I offered weakly. "Yeah, before or after she found out about you being a lord's heir." Ouch. She might have had a point there. "Don't be mean, Letha. She's a babe," said Talgoth helpfully. "No offence, Jazz, but she only let you kiss her because Samok had been put to bed. She's been eyeing him up all week." I looked over to where Sally, Mandela and Dunkel were watching Samok and Donnick throwing a ball around on the grass. Samok had looked particularly green on the ferry, but after the white and a solid lunch had apparently perked up. She got a bit drunk, had some fun with the next most eligible male, and now she regrets it. Don't say I didn't warn you. Bollocks to this, I thought. Went over to the others. Behind me I could hear Talgoth laugh. "Nice one. Now you've hurt his feelings." "Well, it's true," she grumbled. "Dunk! Catch!" yelled Samok, feigning a throw. Dunkel threw his hands in front of his face. "Just because I can see now doesn't mean I'm coordinated." He grinned at me as I sat. "Sports never were my forte, can you tell?" Sella, meanwhile, was giggling and whispering loudly to Mantley. "Lizzie Lolly is wearing coal today. Did you see? Hope she's not trying to improve her looks." I thought I should say something in her defence. "Wait!" "She's wearing it for the sun, like the Neathi do." Sella laughed and raised her perfect eyebrows. "So a little lesbian has her champion. Look, it's not as if I mind gay people, I just don't want her trying to put any moves on me." She tittered. "Oi! Shush! Come here." "Not now. Story time." I looked up as a shadow fell across me. Lalitha was standing there, fists balled at her sides. "Sella, you have far too high an opinion of yourself," she said quietly but clearly. "I wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot barge pole, not if you were the last woman on earth." She stalked off to sit with the mentors in the shade, leaving Sella open-mouthed, a blush darkening her pretty features. She tried to wave the embarrassment away. "No manners, these country girls. No manners at all," she sniffed, clearly shaken by the confrontation. Emma wandered over and placed a gentle hand on Sella's shoulders. "Darling, it's not nice to speak ill of others," she giggled to lighten the mood, "especially when those other people have Neathi blood hearing." The town clock sounded that the time was 1/4 to the hour. The bells pealing across the green. The doors of the temple, a handsome old stone building, opened and people dribbled out. The tables at the cafes were mostly full of people, and children played on the grass, running and shrieking in the hot afternoon. "We've got a lovely temple here," Mantley told me as we stood, and I helped her fold the picnic blankets. It was a church of one of the old religions that they converted after the leaving, so it's ancient. It's got a great organ too, and our organist is just fabulous. Zala had gone over to talk to Samok and Donnick. Mentally saw where I was looking and shrugged. "Sorry about Zal. She really is a nice girl, but she can be a bit difficult." Zala laughed at something Samok said and touched his arm. "So she does regret it then," I muttered, more a statement than a question. "She's confused. Emma had a talk with her. Yellow nature, Fleshke, Carl nature, and all that. Don't screw the crew. Yeah, Charlie gave me that one as well. Doesn't seem to be stopping her now, though, does it? I gritted my teeth, trying desperately not to watch Salah with Samok. Mantley wrinkled her nose at me. She'll calm down. She's just a bit boy crazy, that's all. She grinned. You're far too nice for her, Jazeth. Oh, good. I'm too nice to get girls now. The awesome high I had felt last night seemed like a joke now. I had been bloody stupid to think a girl like Zella would ever be really interested. Crossly, I dumped the blanket in one of the baskets and went to stand with Lalitha, who was watching Talgoth on the beach, skipping stones on the lake. Go on then, you told me so, right? Oi, I wasn't gonna say that. She glanced at me wryly. You're much too nice for her anyway. She'd eat you alive. So everyone keeps saying, I muttered bitterly. Whoop! 8 times! Did you see that? Cried Talgoth, bouncing up the beach. Yeah, nicely done, you big ginger lout, called Lalitha. He ruffled her hair under her hood as he passed us. Right, we're gonna go get this temple business out of the way, or what? He skipped over to the others, the picnic now cleared. Lalitha paused for a second, still looking out over the lake, the hills on the little side barely visible. Jazz? Yeah? Thanks for, for sticking up for me and stuff. She kicked at a pebble that had found its way onto the grass. I hardly said anything. Still, thanks. It occurred to me that perhaps she hadn't had that many people on her side in the past. I grinned at her as we turned back to the group. Well, we're going to have to be buddies now, what with the hall and the academy and all that. The others had started walking across the green to the temple as we caught up, Stephen and Alan still carrying the baskets, though they looked considerably lighter now. Mantley was leading the group, explaining about the history of the Nello temple. Oi, come here. Get up. Come. Come on. Come. Here too. Here, please. Come. Come. Sit. Oh. Mantley was leading the group, explaining about the history of the Nello temple. Ugh, the old religion sounds so barbaric, exclaimed Sella, tossing her head. Well, there's one thing you can be grateful for, my dear, Emma said, taking her arm. Other groups had entered the temple before us, and we were the last lot through the doors. A shaven-haired acolyte handed us a piece of paper and pencils as we entered, and we took our seats as she closed the door behind us. The Nello temple was a large building, its solid stone exterior giving way to wooden panelling inside. Light filtered through stained glass windows, sending coloured beams that lit the incense-filled air. On Sundays, temples in populous regions held small services on the hour for most of the day. Wooden pews were laid out in 2 rows on either side of a centre aisle, covered with blue velvet cushions for comfort. An elderly priestess, bald and with spectacles perched on her nose, entered through a door to the side of the altar. She paused in front of the statue of Queen Littlebitch and bowed her head. The congregation stood and did the same. She turned to us, motioning for us to sit, which we did with much rustling. The priestess stood behind the altar in her plain yellow robes and raised her hands. Welcome, friends, to this place of peace and contemplation. I am grateful to you for taking this time to remember and be thankful. She gestures to the organist, seated at the organ console to the side of the altar. Music began to float through the air as the organist played, the keys on the console controlling the air being forced through the great brass and wood pipes arranged behind the statue of Queen Littlebitch. As was customary, the priestess was writing on her own piece of card, and the rest of us followed suit, leaning the paper on the ledge of the pew in front. We were supposed to write down the things that we were grateful for, the act of writing forcing us to clarify our feelings. I thought for a moment before putting pencil to paper. I was still feeling more bitter than grateful, but I forced myself to concentrate. Charlie, I wrote. That was an easy one. I was grateful to Charlie for coming to rescue me from my tedious existence as Lord's heir and for generally being such a cool guy. Talgith and Lalitha were next, for being nice to me and for not appearing to care about what I was. I chewed my pencil and thought. Hjaven, I wrote, guessing at the spelling. For the mere existence of it, that made all these wonderful things possible, and for the fact that apparently I had it, and it had been recognised, and I was not, after all, an insane pyromaniac. Sella, I scrawled quickly, last, because even if she was being horrible and ignoring me, she had still given me my first proper kiss, and it had been pretty amazing. As the music ended, I folded my piece of paper and sat back. The priestess up the front held up her list. I am grateful for Queen Little Bitch, for her bravery and sacrifice in leading the leaving, so that humans can live happily and at peace. I am grateful for everyone here today, who have taken the time to reflect and acknowledge those things that bring wonder and joy to our lives. I am grateful for Min Gilbert at the bakery, for saving me one of her special pies that I will enjoy for my supper. She smiled beatifically at the congregation as we laughed. She folded her piece of paper and dropped it into the small charcoal brazier on the altar, and as it burnt to ashes, she placed her hands together. So mote it be, she intoned, opening her hands and gesturing for us all to stand. The organist began playing again, a strident, joyful piece, and we all shuffled out of our pews and formed a line down the aisle to go and place our own pieces of paper in the brazier. When I made it to the front, I dropped my small list in and placed my hands together. So mote it be, I said quietly as the paper crumpled and caught alight. The priestess smiled at me in a kindly way, her rather wrinkly old face suffused with happiness. I bent my head to receive her blessing, and she touched me on the forehead. Peace and joy be with you, child. I thanked her and turned, walking back down the aisle to the now open doors and out into the hot sun. Outside, our groups gathered, as everyone performed the ritual and left the temple. On the whole, everyone seemed quiet and contemplative, but happy, which I guess is the point of the temple services anyway. Mentally spoke a few words to the acolyte at the door who collected our pencils, then came over to us, smiling. I told you the organist was good. Hey, there's a great cafe just over there. I could totally go for some ice cream right now. Oh, that's something I forgot to put on my list. Ice cream. She giggled. Fine then, she called back in the direction of the temple. I'm grateful for ice cream. We laughed with her as she led us down the cobbled walk that edged the green. Not far from the temple was the cafe, set back from the rest of the shops with shaded tables scattered over the courtyard. Inside, a glass-fronted counter held an assortment of sweet treats and pastries and big tubs of flavoured ice cream. The confectioner who runs this place is Blood, Mantley told us. That's how they keep it cold in there. She waved her hand at the tubs. Cool, eh? I had never had ice cream before, and the waitress behind the counter scooped some of the dark brown chocolate-flavoured one into a hard waffle cone for me. The mentors eschewed the cold treats in favour of ordering coffees, and Thomas brought up the rear, handing over coins from the hall allowance purse. We settled at some tables outside, us Bloods taking the sunnier spots so the mentors could sip their coffee in the shade. So, what were you grateful for on this fine day? Asked Talgith, leaning back in his chair and taking huge, freezing bites of his ice cream, 3 scoops high, each a different flavour. Charlie, mostly, for bringing me here, I suppose. Huh, me too. Well, Jimmy, obviously. Lalitha looked delicately at a drip threatening her fingers. It was a bit strange. We never went to the temple much at home, except for the festivals, of course. Lalitha looked at me appraisingly. Us neither. Maybe people at home would be nicer if they did. I don't know if it was the weather or what, but that miserable little hellhole was filled with bastards. Lalasol? I asked, and she nodded, then looked between Talgith and me. So, you two really didn't know each other before coming here? How big is Gel's Head? Telgith grinned. Well, I knew who he was, of course, but he didn't come to school with us. And, I don't know, maybe 8,000 people live in Jaleshead proper? Who knows how many in the district? It's 7,224 in town, 23,590 in the district, as of the last census. Telgith raised his eyebrows, and I blushed and looked down. Yeah, I had tutors and stuff instead. Dunkel, who was cleaning a spot of ice cream from his spectacles, overheard and leaned in. Okay, no offence, Jazz, but why, if the country's all democratic and that, are there still hereditary lordships for the districts? The answer I knew all too well, having had it drummed into me from an early age. Because we have to start training to be a lord starting from when we're really little. That's why I wasn't allowed to go to school. I had to have the tutors to teach me all about boring legal stuff and taxation and... yeah, I finished weakly. Telgith grinned. Sounds bloody awful, mate. He crunched on his cone. Hey, we'll all be able to vote next elections. Dunkel looked up mournfully. I won't. I'll still be 19. Sella glanced over and waved her fingers impatiently. Don't be silly. You can vote when you're 18. You just can't be selected until you're 20. Oh-ho! One of us could be selected. It could even be me! Telgith stretched his hand behind his head and Sella snorted. Hey! I'd be an awesome king! He grinned at her. I thought you wanted to be a smith, Lalitha asked, ignoring Sella. Oh, well, I do, but it only takes 4 years. I could smith after that. Speaking of which, the Queen arrives at midwinter. Have you seen the picture of her? Total babe. He poked Lalitha in the shoulder and she reddened and elbowed his hand away. I actually hadn't seen a copy of the Ashlew portrait of our current Queen, Thealik of Aelion. All the candidates at each election had their portraits painted by the famous artist Ashlew, and copies of these were distributed to the temples where voting took place. The portrait of the winning candidate was then retained and hung somewhere, but I hadn't particularly paid any attention at home or at the 2 temples I had visited in the past couple of days. Sella smiled loftily at us. My father customarily holds a function for the royal party when they're in Lille. You might even get to meet her. Telgith's eyes bulged. Don't get any ideas. She's far too old for you. Hardly. She was young when she got elected. She'd be only, 23 by now? Sella rolled her eyes and turned away. We could see the ferry pull into the dock, spilling its passengers down the gangplank, and the mentors moved to leave, the journeyman hoisting the baskets and the rest of us finishing our cones. Thomas handed over more coins to the captain and we settled on the ferry. The sun was beginning to droop over the plains to the west, and I looked back at Nello as the steam engine roared into life and we pulled away from the jetty, taking us back home to Lille. Dinner at the hall was a subdued affair, all of us feeling the lingering effects of the night before and an afternoon in the hot sun. At the end of the meal, before I could gratefully get away to my own room, Eve instructed us to get an early night as our classes at the academy started the next day. Downstairs, Charlie helped himself to a bath as I stretched out on a chair in front of the fire. I was tired, certainly, but also restless, and I felt the need to stand and pace for a bit. Charlie found me doing this when he emerged from the bathroom, toweling his white mane. He caught my mood at once. Fancy some blue, old chap? Blue what? Blue moss. Helps you sleep. Oh. I thought for a minute. I thought we weren't allowed to smoke in the rooms. We're not, but we can go upstairs. To the common room? He shook his head. Come on, I'll show you. He gathered his pipe and his small blue leather bag and led me up the stairs and through the common room, which was mercifully empty, the fires banked for the night. We went through the door that led to the kitchen and turned towards another door just inside that revealed a neat spiral staircase. I hadn't even realised there was another floor, I whispered to him as we wandered down a short hallway that had 7 doors, 3 on either side and 1 at the end. Where do you think the journeyman lived? This is the guest floor, he whispered back as he unlatched the door at the end and pushed it open. I followed him outside onto a small balcony cut into the roof. It was shaded with cloth and had lavender bushes growing in pots, scenting the night air. The balcony just had room for a table and a few chairs, and we sat, looking out over the Niathi Quarter, lines of streets bathed by globes in the light of the moon. Charlie sparked the pipe, handed it to me, and we sat in companionable silence as we smoked. Charlie, did you stay up here when you came to Lille? I did indeed. I was in the middle one on the lake side. It would have been, 18 years ago. Anya and Aliak had the very same room we're in now. He rushed on, obviously not wanting to ask me about Anna. Yeah, I was here most summers. Anya helped me find a nice apartment after the first one. What did you do in the winters then? Oh, what journeymen are supposed to do. Travel around, explore the world. I even spent one winter down in Yule. Wow, really? How long did it take to get there? Yule was the country to the south, almost completely cut off from us by the massive sweep of the Rye Mountains. Charlie chuckled. 2 months each way. It's pretty crazy down there. Warm though. I even saw an elephant. A real one. And? They don't look anything like us. He grinned in the dark. Anyway, I soon realised I was pretty good at sniffing out Niathi bloods. Eh? You've never wondered how we knew about you? Well, I had, of course, but had never found the right moment to ask. Well, that's the other thing we're supposed to do while travelling around. Finding out about any suspicious fires, meeting young people, then discreetly probing to see if they had any Hyavan. Did you find me? I asked, half hoping. Oh no, boy, this would have been when you were just little. I believed you were detected by the assessment team from the last election. There was a fire, I believe? I scratched my head ruefully. Oh yes, I remembered the night the Niathi had come to Jail's Head all too well. Funnily enough, Talgoth was identified by the same team. Niathi bloods don't show any signs of having Hyavan until they hit puberty and don't get any sort of real power or control until their late teens, when their frontal lobes develop, in their brains. That's where the Hyavan comes from. Right. Yeah. More seemingly basic information I had no idea about. Anyway, when I was a journeyman, I was pretty good at finding Niathi bloods. I'm good with the brain and emotional stuff. I even thought about becoming a psychosolist. He looked at me expectantly as if anticipating some sort of reaction. I don't really... psychosolists. They're like regular solists, but instead of healing physical ailments with Hyavan, they heal people's brains. I thought that was psychotherapists. Ah, no, there's a difference. Psychotherapists give counselling for mental and emotional problems, sometimes using Hyavan to give temporary relief. Psychosolists use Hyavan to permanently change the chemical emitters and neural pathways of the patient. It's like brain surgery. Remember when Fiona that is, made that hair blue? Yeah, it's like the difference between the first time, which slipped away, and the second time, which was permanent. Anyway, the training would have taken another 10 or so years, and I figured mentoring would be much more fun. And I don't have to hang out with the criminally insane. I thought about something Charlie had mentioned a few times. Why do you like humans so much? He looked at me surprised. Why wouldn't I? You're fascinating, you really are. I don't know if it's your short lifespan. It's not that short, I grumbled, and Charlie laughed. Well, comparatively speaking, of course. But you have so much energy and creativity. Everything in the Enclave is so slow, so measured. Humans are different. He waved his pipe around, lost for words. You have ideas, you have conviction. It's remarkable, it really is. I was surprised at his vehemence. Anyway, you feeling tired yet? You do have class tomorrow. On cue, I yawned loudly. How? I was tired now. Charlie yawned as well, then grinned at me. Come on then, let's go get some sleep. End of chapter 9. Yay.